Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Vila Bianca.
I'm Eric Murphy.
This is Skeptic Generation.
And we need to talk.
I remembered. We did it at the same time. It's been a month, you guys.
It has. I'm so glad you're back. I missed you so much.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back. Not in Texas, but with you and on the show. So we are good. We're excited. I'm excited to jump into calls and talk with some people today. A couple of announcements before we get started. Next week is Eric's birthday.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm turning 35, and I am not excited about that at all.
You're over the hill, my friend.
I'm looking at the back half, and I'm thinking that's not cool.
Well, I mean, back half of that is 70, which is, still.
Why'd you gotta go? I was thinking of back half of my 30s.
Oh, I just doubled back half of your.
Great.
Yeah, sorry.
Great. No, it's exciting. I don't think that you're going to be able to beat what you got me for my birthday last year, because you proposed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. It'll be a year.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay.
And I'm really happy about that. But yeah, it's good to have you back. It's good to have some normalcy today. This was actually a really good week for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You started a new job.
I did start a new job, and it has helped stave away the
existential dread,
the absolute despair, which is nice. Anything you can do to prevent panic attacks is good. But I started at the new job. It's fantastic. The people are wonderful, and I can't wait to go back. And that is really crazy to have for a job. So
yeah,
it's nice.
I'm very excited. We're working together. Mm-hmm. So I've conscripted him.
In the same company, but far from working together.
Yeah, we couldn't do that.
No.
That would be impossible to work with you. I'm sorry. Just having any kind of project together would just
every
untenable.
Single hat we're just wearing with each other. Yeah.
Couldn't do it. All right. And then after that, I'm going to be giving Eric a little bit of a break. And having a guest on the 18th, hopefully. They've already said yes. So my hope is that on the 18th, we will have a really special guest.
Really cool person.
I'm excited about. I don't think this person has ever been on a call-in show before. And so, it's going to be very interesting because honestly, every single time they tweet anything or post anything, I'm like, that was such a good take. So I'm very excited. And we'll be giving more information about that after. And then, finally, if you want to talk with me or Eric or both of us, feel free to call the show at 585-526-8774 or tiny.cc/callSG.
Yeah, if you have the choice to do either, click the link. Do the callSG link because for some reason the clarity is so much nicer. But if you're wondering, should I call? Can I afford it? We're paying for all of it. It is toll free.
Yes, indeed.
And we'd love to hear from you.
All right. So let's dive in with a call from a theist, Javier. I think Javier has called in before.
They have.
And he wants to talk about the greater good and the problem of evil. So welcome to the show, Javier.
Hello?
Hello. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. It's good to be back. The call may be from South Carolina, but this is in fact Javier from Miami.
I figured. I thought it was you. Welcome back to the show. What's your question for today?
All right. So ever since the last time I called in, I've just been continuing to think about theism and or lack thereof more. The various apologetics and counter-apologetics, and of course, as part of that, I've been listening and or watching several atheist content creators. Although I have to be fair, I have been doing that since high school. But one that I've been one of the ones I've been watching quite a bit is the Apologia channel.
Yeah.
And so something that I and this is not a call out in any way. It's just an idea that I first heard on the Apologia channel, and it was the idea that according to what I've heard him say, in his opinion, the problem of evil is not a strong argument against theism because a God could allow some sort of evil for a greater good because, he's omniscient, so he could know. Although I don't really, I think regardless of the argument of a greater good, if you're dealing with both something that is all powerful and all good, I don't really think there's any room for a greater good because he could just make the good. He doesn't need to take any sort of like longer process with it.
Yeah.
Right. There are a couple problems with that. I mean, it's a way to continue the conversation without shutting it down right away with like the standard, problem of evil, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, like all of these things like couldn't exist. And so it does bring the conversation one step further, which is good a lot of the time because, people can tell if you're just kind of memorizing your response, right? And you want to engage. So the problems with that idea, though, that the greater good is justification for suffering is it's kind of just another assertion, right? So like you can say, oh, there's a greater good and God knows it. But for the person who you're trying to convince, the assertions are still just kind of hanging there in the air, right? Like, okay, can you show me this greater good? Can you prove that this greater good exists and this is the way to get to it? Because if you can't do that, then we're kind of at that same impasse that we were at the beginning before the problem of evil came up, which is one of us has made an assertion about a God and the other person has, rejected that assertion. And then, of course, the other one is exactly what you said, which is that the greater good necessitating suffering implies that God does not have the ability to create the greater good without suffering. So, yeah. Does that kind of summarize where you've been coming from?
Yeah, the only sort of, I guess, playing, it's not really devil's advocate in this case, I guess playing God's advocate here would be the possibility of, like, growing from the journey that involves struggles. Like, an example I'm sure anyone who's read the Bible would probably bring up would be the story of Joseph, sold into slavery in Egypt and then eventually rising to the point of right under the Pharaoh and, so on and so forth, of how people can be tempered by adversity is the only sort of argument in favor of the greater good that I could see.
Yeah, and then we have to have that kind of conversation with, okay, well, that would maybe explain suffering to an extent, explain evil to an extent, right? If you personally were put through something that ultimately didn't kill you, but made you stronger, say, then maybe we could have that conversation. But a lot of the conversations that are had when we bring up the problem of evil are very much about there are people dying all of the time with no help and with no, there are people who die that nobody knows about, right? So like they clearly aren't getting the emotional catharsis of growing into a better person. They're dead. And the people who don't know about them, their lives are unchanged. My life is unchanged from, the number of people who died since this morning. So I think that could be used in certain contexts with certain people. And if it gives you comfort to think about your life like that, like, oh, I'm going through this hard thing, but it's going to make me a better person, that's super cool.
I disagree.
What do you disagree with? I'm curious.
So, well, Javier, did you want to respond to V before I hop in?
Sure.
Was there anything you wanted to say to V before I hopped in?
Oh, I'm sorry. I must have misheard your question. No, go ahead.
No worries. Okay, so I guess the part that really kills me is, and I know it's not really, what kills me, Javier, is it feels like main character syndrome. It feels like when people assume that they're the main character and everyone else's suffering only exists to make them a better person, it trivializes the lives and the importance of the people who died. And it feels hubristic, and I like the way that I view the problem of evil isn't that all bad or all adversity is evil or that you couldn't justify any kind of adversity, but that, like V said, it's the stuff that is inexcusable that we got to start with, because if you can justify the inexcusable stuff, then we can get to the more, trivial, I couldn't find my keys, so I was late to work, and because I was late to work, I wasn't there on 9/11. That's very sweet, but that just does not take into account all of the people dying of malnutrition, And so I think that's where the conversation should start. And because I think that's where the conversation should start, it doesn't really vibe with me, this kind of main character idea.
Well, I mean, I think it's a good place to start, to be like, okay, let's grant that idea that struggle makes you a better person. Who is being made a better person by? And then, ask a question around like the person who died today on the street, homeless, that nobody knew existed, right? Like, who does that benefit in the long run? Mm-hmm. And how is that being used to better us or society, So I think it's useful to start there as kind of that, again, like not shutting the conversation down right away. Mm-hmm. But very, very quickly, once you start looking at it honestly, I think you get to these places where it really does kind of fall apart.
Well, here's a thought. What if it only affects omnibenevolence? What if it only affects the all-loving part? Because I've met plenty of polytheists who've been like, yeah, I don't think that any gods are nice. In fact, there are plenty of people who would say that God is a total asshole. It doesn't disprove their existence. It just doesn't mean that they're a very nice person.
I believe that Judaism also doesn't have the omnibenevolent aspect either. It's just certain versions of Christianity because it merged with ancient Greek philosophy about, that Platonistic, there must be something perfect. Oh, that thing must be God. What must that thing be if that thing is God and perfect? And that's how the triomnies kind of came into being, because It merged as a marketing campaign, which is fascinating.
Well, and the fact that it stapled itself onto a culture that viewed their God as someone who, if you misbehaved, is going to put you over your knee and fucking spank you.
Right. So that's where a lot of those contradictions come from. Javier, we've been talking back and forth a lot. What are your thoughts listening to all this?
My thoughts are there's a lot thrown out there. Well, I guess I'll start by saying I do see the main character syndrome sort of thing, although because there's a lot of people, I guess it's more like MMO player syndrome. But, yeah. So I mean, like that's an objection that I would have. Like. Why did God decide, one person, this is the person that dies, so someone else becomes better or whatever, Mm-hmm. Like I just, it's like, what was the word? No, not the word. It was an interview that never mind. That's kind of a different topic. But yeah, I'm sorry. It's just that a lot of things get brought up, and then my brain goes in a couple different directions.
Oh yeah, no, you're fine.
Yeah, in the notes it says that you think that greater good is a decent rebuttal. Do you still think that's the case?
I may have misspoke. It's not that I think it is a decent rebuttal, that I think some people view it as a decent rebuttal, mm-hmm. And I myself, to be honest, I think it has some usefulness, though not a lot of usefulness, simply because if you're still dealing with maximally powerful or all-powerful and omnibenevolent, you gotta, there's no really reason for there to be the suffering unless that suffering is in some way good. But then, who defines good in a non-tautological way?
Right, exactly.
At that point, it just depends on where your axioms are, and that takes you an entirely different route. I don't know, what I imagine is if we're both standing at a playpen and there are toddlers in there, and I'm saying, you know what, I want this kid to have autonomy. I want them to be able to make choices and all of that in the world, and it's important. So I throw some toys in there. Cool, they've got choices. And then I throw some tools, like some power tools in there, and you go, Eric, what? Like, the kid's gonna hurt him. Why do they need a power drill? Well, I need them to make choices. You go, oh, I mean, this is some weird shit, but okay. And then I throw a loaded gun in there. There are limitations on what we can do. And I think that if there was a all good God, mm-hmm. then why can't a skinned knee be the worst that happens? Why childhood leukemia? Why parasites that dig into your eyeballs? Why, this unbelievably horrific suffering? it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. We don't have the ability to jump off a cliff and defy gravity and fly. That is not a choice that we have. But we wouldn't say that that specific lack of a choice interrupts the ability to make decisions about other things.
Yeah.
So why isn't there a universe where harm and suffering and evil, to the extent that it would actually, create long-term detriment even, just not be an option, just physically. So yeah, this is getting on for a while, and I want to make sure that Javier has time to wrap up his thoughts as well. But yeah, we could go on and on just talking about the different ways to break this one down. Javier, any last thoughts?
Yeah, last thought. Although probably one that I probably call in next week to sort of maybe try to continue, because something just popped in my head, and it is how ultimately when I see all the suffering, I don't like to call quote unquote natural evil because there's no evil behind an earthquake, so I prefer the term suffering.
Yeah.
But suffering and also evil actions by other people, and I see all of that, and the non-theistic realities to that would be simply, bad stuff happens. Ultimately just bad stuff happens, and trying to ascribe morality to it isn't particularly productive. But when I found myself going down that road, in my thought, I get down to what is the only thing, aside from me valuing a lack of suffering, what's keeping me on that road, so to speak, Like, of course, I want to be good because I'm part of a social species and we need to cooperate to survive and thrive. But then what's going to stop some people from taking advantage of a vulnerability? And to be fair, people do. It's not like there's anything stopping them aside from getting caught.
Yeah. It's interesting. I would say that a world without a God is one that gives us more autonomy. Because if we just, like you said, live in a world where there is just bad shit just happens, right? Then if that's the case, we're not going to be personally offended and pointing fingers at each other when a tornado blows through. But when we look at each other and go, we're going to work together as a community to help each other, to survive this together and to build something greater, then, I don't know, I feel like there's a greater pride and achievement that way. And it also, I don't know, helps me let go of sadness when things happen, if I know that bad shit just happens, Like this idea of, how come there's not enough, how come people don't suffer for the bad things that they do? A lot of people live until their golden years and die in their beds after committing horrendous atrocities. Where's the justice? And yeah, just seeing it as bad stuff just happens means that you don't need to look for cosmic justice.
Well, I think we bring to this conversation, no matter where we're coming from, this idea of should and how the world ought to be. And well, if I think that thriving is what we ought to strive for, what's to stop another group from saying, no, I think that suffering is what we should be striving for? And the truth is, there is nothing stopping that from happening. And that's just kind of how things are. And we can build metrics and say, okay, well, if we value things like longevity, if we value things like, mental health and, access to food and all of these things, here's what we can do. And here are the societies and the structures and organizational communities that we've built that make that better. And here's how it makes it worse. And we can use that to kind of get some semblance of data in there. But for the most part, it is ideological. And there are going to be people who have different ideologies. And that's the reason we have what we have today. Like, I don't understand how people are like, well, how could we have what we have today without like a basis of morality? And I'm like, do you see what's going on today? We don't. Like, if anything is going to explain what we're seeing today from a purely like, I see this, why is this, what's the most likely explanation? It is that it's subjective and ideology based. And I'm going on a tangent now.
No, it's okay.
We need to move on to the next call, but Javier, thank you so much for calling in, and definitely do call back. I know this was a lot of different things being thrown at once, so if you hone in on something and want to discuss it further, feel free to call back.
Alrighty, thanks for listening to my rambling. Have a nice day.
You too.
We could say the same. All right.
Yeah. I don't know. We threw out a whole bunch of tidbits that are really fun places to go on, down a rabbit trail and discover and learn and explore. And I think that's really important. I think we did good. Who are we talking to next?
Let's talk with Chelsey in North Carolina.
All right.
Chelsey has an interesting question, and I do want to be upfront right away and say that I have not seen this movie. Intentionally, but I am curious what your thoughts are, because I'm assuming that you have seen it.
I have seen just portion of it through like it was an ad like on atheist videos and stuff. I just watched a little bit of it I didn't want to give it too much time. So basically what he was doing. Oh, sorry.
Right before we get into exact specifics, I do want to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about, because they can't they can't see the notes, and that's on me. Chelsey's calling in to talk about What is a Woman, the, air quotes documentary that Matt Walsh put out, beginning of Pride, to kind of attack the queer community, specifically trans people. It's been very much talked about. It's been showing up on ads for, atheist content for a little while. So
that's gross.
Yeah, it's disgusting. But Chelsey, you said you've seen like bits and pieces of it through these ads.
I only watched I didn't want to give it too much time because I don't feel like promoting that shit.
You're right.
So I just watched a little bit, just to see what he was trying to do, where he was coming from. I know he's got an agenda and he's got a bias, of course. He's not coming from a charitable standpoint.
Yeah.
Or listening standpoint. Basically what he was doing was, he also had Ben Shapiro on it as well.
Of course.
Another downer. But he was going around asking random people on the street.
The Ken Ham approach.
Oh, yeah, definitely. What is a woman? And then I'm pretty sure he cherry-picked some people off the street that were not ready for giving an answer. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty sure that's what he did, but I only got that far. And I was hoping that I know his position and all that. He's very anti-trans and queer and homophobic and all that.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said. I love that you brought up the fact that he's going around asking different people, what is a woman? One of the things that you really do need to look out for, it's an engaging way to build a documentary or a YouTube show, right? That on the street, Billy on the street yelling, name a woman, just any woman, and people just blinking because you're yelling at them, right? Of course, the names of women in your life, but if someone's in your face with a microphone all of a sudden, you blank. It just happens. And so it's funny to watch, but it really is kind of a big red flag if people are getting their point across by that means. And there's actually, speaking of Paul Gia, I believe that he had Anthony Magnabosco on to talk about one of Ken Ham's documentaries where he does the same thing with the definition of evolution, or have you ever lied in your life? Yes, then you're a sinner. Do you admit you're a sinner? Do you admit you need saving? He would go and he would attack people on the street in the same way. And Anthony Magnabosco laid out some really good guidelines in terms of what to look for when you're watching that kind of on the street content that would hopefully, help you see, oh yeah, this was cherry picked, or, oh, that cut weirdly, or all of these things where a lot of the time what Anthony will do, and for those of you who don't know, Anthony does a similar kind of, meet people in public and just have a spontaneous conversation. But he will film the entire thing from beginning to end from multiple angles and ask for their permission and be respectful of their time to think and keep it to like 5 minutes, and then releases the whole thing as one big chunk, right? There's no editing, there's no, cutting or clipping or anything like that. So that you're getting the full conversation. So that's a big red flag just in general, regardless of the conversation topic. And I'm not surprised that that is the approach that Matt chose to take. The only other thing I will say about it that I know from watching other people review it is that he actually does talk to some people who do know what they're talking about. He goes to their offices, he sits down across from them, and he has these conversations, and they give him really good answers. And the method that he chooses to adopt is just to kind of laugh ridiculous, like, what? And then just like, that is his rebuttal. His rebuttal is, that sounds weird. And then that apparently wins the argument. So there is actually some good information about trans issues in that documentary that was kept in because he didn't realize it was good information because he was so ready to just like dismiss everything. So it's a mess, ultimately. It's just a messy, awful, shitty thing. And I'm sorry that you had to deal with ads about that on YouTube content. That sucks.
I think it may have been some of your content as well.
Oh, gosh. Well, we will happily take his money.
Yeah.
But, that sucks.
And yeah, it really does. And what a fundamental misunderstanding of what other people are talking about when they make these arguments. It's just interesting that when we're talking about social ideas,
right,
that you would walk around asking people what their concept of it is, because if you were to go back in time or go to different cultures, you were going to get different answers. And because of that, wouldn't that just flick the light going, oh, maybe the concept of a woman is what society is creating, that we are, collectively engaging in these it's just, it's so weird. It's so myopic. And I'm sure it probably does it also include misunderstandings of what the conversation's about when it comes to sociology or biology?
Oh my goodness. That's the entire conversation ultimately. But yeah, I think there is always value in getting strangers' opinions on things, I think. I think it's fascinating. I think it's fun. It's why I do this show, right? Mm-hmm. But what we do is we let you come to us, and if you're not comfortable continuing, or if we don't have the information, that we need to rebut a claim, we're going to end the call and be like, hey, we're going to step away, and then we're going to do more research, right? And so there are ways to have these conversations with strangers in ways that are productive, in ways that are respectful, and in ways that are honest. And if you're just, picking and choosing the ones that make your opponent look the worst and clipping them together and saying you win, that's a very cheap trick. And it's also very predictable. Like, it's not even creative. And considering how long this documentary has been in the works, it's kind of disappointing. It's like, I could do that in an afternoon, Matt. Come on.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I know you mentioned Anthony Magnabosco.
Yeah.
There's another YouTuber that also does SE, and he's from North Carolina, where I live.
Oh yeah. Who's that?
He's even in one of my atheist groups, the local atheist group that I'm in. Are you okay with me promoting his
Absolutely,
YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay, it's just called simply, it's called Being Reasonable.
Oh, sure. I think I've seen this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to add a link in the description so people can go check out another SE channel. That sounds cool.
Street epistemology as an approach is
really
fantastic to watch, and kind of watching people engage with Socratic questioning. Doesn't it? Yeah. I'll go off on a tangent.
Well, thank you for calling in, Chelsey.
Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, I hope this was cathartic, at least to be like, yeah, fuck that guy. Oh my goodness. Okay.
What do we got?
We have Sakura in New York. I think I'm saying that correctly. Sakura is exploring paganism and is looking for some feedback. Sakura, is that the correct way to say your name?
I will respond either way. It's perfectly fine.
I would prefer to get it correct.
It's Sakura. You actually pronounced it pretty well.
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, you're dealing with some, it sounds like shifting ideological mindsets, or, just diving into more of the cultural or mythological aspects of things. Talk a little bit about where you're at right now.
Sure. But first, hi.
Hi.
Hello.
And I'm very nervous about this. I'm shaking. If I go off on a tangent, please keep me back on track.
Will do.
So just a bit of my religious background. Nothing typical, nothing out of the typical. I grew up Christian for 16 years of my life. I separated myself from that when I was 16 because it wasn't right for me. That caused a whole family rift, as it should. Mm-hmm. I went into Satanism because of an ex-boyfriend, and that's what he was. But even he felt that wasn't right for him. So we went atheist, and then I've been going between atheism and being agnostic because I'm also a scientist, and having an absolute there's nothing there didn't sit right with me. Mm-hmm. And then I learned about paganism through my current partner, which is Steve. Eric, you've had a couple of conversations with him.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So he asked me to call in, particularly when V was here, because he felt they would give me assistance, which is I'm starting this new journey into paganism, mm-hmm. and I'm trying to figure out what I should do, how I should do it. I guess hearing from other people's journeys, and I know that everybody says, this is your own journey, you can figure it out, but
that's not very helpful.
I'm an introvert. I don't like going around talking to people on a daily basis, and 2, looking on the internet can get overwhelming, and you never know what's the right information. Mm-hmm. So being around like-minded people, I felt would have been helpful. So I guess my question is kind of weird because it's extremely broad. I don't know a way to kind of spearhead it into something simpler as help me.
Oh,
that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for calling in, and thank you, Steve, for suggesting that you do. So the biggest piece that I would start with, and this is something that I wish that I had been told back when I was first starting to kind of dabble in ritual and spells and witchcraft and all of this, was there are very many groups of people in all different configurations, and they are going to say that they have the correct way, and that you have to do things this way if you want to be real, right? Or if you don't want to be appropriative, or if you want to be, just the correct way to do this thing. And on some level, you always want to make sure that you aren't appropriating, another culture. That's, ideal. But mm-hmm. for a lot of this, it isn't going to be you must be a Dianic witch, or else you're not really one. Or, you must be of this particular sect of, Norse pagans, or you aren't really one, right? And there is going to be that mindset coming into play when you talk to other people. So as you get into this, as you start finding other pagans, you are going to come across that. Don't pay attention to it. It's not helpful. You and I both know, having been raised in Christianity, what that kind of purity mindset does. It just chills out any kind of creative or passion energy that you've got going, and it's not useful. So feel free to dismiss all of that. The other thing is that there is no one right way, as long as you are being mindful about it. So there is this really intense thing that I realized when I first started doing all of this was I started feeling a lot of guilt around things like, oh, I'm not setting up my altar correctly. Or, I haven't done a ritual in 3 days. Does this make me wrong? Or, I did this part before this part, and is something going to happen that is not what I want to happen? Like all of these very kind of just rules and regulations, very legalistic. And I realized after a while that what I was doing was I was taking a lot of that latent kind of Christianity and that concept of you must do things a certain way or with certain, emotions or at certain times or consistently every day. And if you don't, then you're bad. And so it actually ended up revealing a lot of things that I had internalized, not directly related to the God concept or to Christianity as a whole, that I still needed to unpack a lot before I was able to really kind of get free and flow into it and really, experience it. So you are going to probably come up against some of those latent things that just kind of are living in your brain that you don't really notice. And once you notice them, it's going to feel like a step backwards. And this goes for anybody in any kind of ideological shift where you're moving from one mindset into another one. Every time you become aware that you are carrying baggage, it's going to feel like you're going backwards, but you're not. I guarantee you, every time you find that piece, that's a step forward. It's a hard one, but you are moving forward. So there would be that as well. And then finally, and then hopefully you can kind of pick a piece of all of this that I'm throwing at you and we can dive in deeper, is be okay with it not being real, if that makes sense. Because real doesn't mean real. So if something can be important and valuable and real in the sense that it impacts you in an actual physical, emotional, psychological way, and then that then impacts the world around you by how you engage with that, and not be real as in, you could... I don't know how to explain this so much. Yeah, go for it.
Sure. If I were to rephrase it, could I say, Sakura, you are exploring and dipping your toes into learning a new culture. And it is culture building that's going on in the pagan communities that you're going to be learning about. And learning about that culture is real. And identifying with and connecting with a culture and with a community is a wonderful thing. Those things are real. Those things being real doesn't impact supernatural beliefs, though. That if you find that culture, if you find that community, if you identify and all of those things, and that's wonderful, and you're growing as a person, you've made friends, that doesn't mean that magic stuff is real. But also recognizing that the magic stuff isn't real doesn't make you less positively impacted by the culture and community that you're becoming a part of. Does that sound right?
That's definitely a part of it. I want to get a little bit more wooey for a minute because
okay,
let's do it.
Oh no, I'm scared.
Sakura's like, let's do it.
Oh no.
All right, so here's something that happened to me. I had set up my altar. It was late at night, and I was listening to these chants. Specifically, it was an ongoing kind of goddess chant, naming the different goddesses of these ancient religions, these ancient cultures. And I was, chanting along. I was getting into this really Zen mindset, right? Just because it felt good. And in my head, there was a flip of a switch. And I could see myself looking back at me from the other side of that altar. And that was freaking creepy and amazing and breathtaking. And in my head, that experience is real. Was I actually on both sides of my altar at the same time? No. Did I actually see a different version of myself from another dimension or from the past or the future looking back at me? No. I would never suggest that that was real in the sense that physics somehow bent out of shape and accommodated me in that moment. What I am saying, though, is that it lives in my memory as something that happened to me. And the catharsis and the awe and the chills down my spine that I experienced then are also real. And I know that that is my brain being playful with itself, right? I was tapping into something that I was able to do. My brain can do that. That's fucking cool. And I have the ability to make it happen, not on command, but with regularity. I can figure out ways to tickle it. And I think that that's a good thing. And I think that it's something that we tend to run away from, especially in very skeptical or atheist circles, because for so long it has been co-opted by toxic religion. But it's just a facet of our brains and a function of what it is to be human. And if you can access that through a means that is not harmful to yourself or other people, you should do that, because that's giving you another facet to explore the world with. So that's what I mean by real but not real, right? Physically, nothing happened at the molecular level in the space-time continuum because I was doing a chant and got super blissed out. Do I have it in my memory just as vividly as many of my actual childhood memories? Yes. So in that instance, it is real but not real. And that frees you up a lot to start playing with that a lot more as you go into it. But that was a lot of information. I'm probably going to get very upset comments in the comment section of this video. But Sakura, what are your thoughts on all of that?
So an old professor of mine, I was a Jewish studies minor, and I was taking a psych of religion class. And the very first class, he said, there are some things that we just don't know. And I have ingrained that as part of my spiritual philosophy, that no matter how I feel or what I go through in my spiritual journey, I can't explain it. And I mentioned I am a scientist, things have to make sense, but having that idea that there's certain things we just don't know, and it just has helped me be open-minded to the different ideas that are out there. And everything that you have said so far has really reinforced what I was afraid of pursuing. And essentially, you just said, yes, you're right. What you're feeling is the good thing. It's to keep going. Don't be afraid. Don't stop. And I do give gratitude to my partner, because I observe how he emulates his spirituality in his life and how it actually keeps him grounded. And seeing amazing people who have that sort of positive spirituality that helps them, I'm like, that's what I need, because I'm a hot ball of chaos. I need grounded. And my mother, by the gods bless her, she's been worried about my spirituality, because I have separated from the Christian faith, but she has accepted that no matter what I do need a spiritual identity, and not having that really offsets everything else that's happening in my life. So this is absolutely amazing, and it's been extremely helpful for me. And I do appreciate you guys taking the time to help me. And this will probably not be the last time I call to ask a question.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll be less broad and more, okay, I figured out the thing. Now I need to just weed out some other things.
The joy is in the journey. Don't wait until you've got it all figured out. It's so fun to explore all those topics. So yeah, best of luck to you.
Yeah, Sakura, you are in a very cool position as somebody who has an understanding of science and is willing to play in this space. I think you're gonna have a lot of fun, and I think that if you feel like this is what you need, then you should do it. And the anxiety around that should come from the excitement of exploring something new and unfamiliar that feels promising, and not from worrying about what other people are going to think of you. Because that's certainly also something I had to get over. But it sounds like you're well on your way, and we would love to have you call back.
I definitely will, and probably with Steve in the background, because I'm usually with him.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for so much for your time. Love you guys, and I miss the kitty.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, she's found a sunbeam around here somewhere. Take care.
Bye. Yeah, I mean, here's the deal for me, like, and I say this every time we have and I resent a little bit the fact that I have to say this every time we have a positive conversation with someone who is not a staunch atheist. Mm-hmm. There is so much shit going on in the world right now. Do what you need to do to be happy. If you're not pushing it on other people, if you are not allowing it to harm you, if you are being skeptical in how you pursue that thing, and you are a kind person, like...
And pragmatically, absolutely.
Right. And we can get into specifics around, like, okay, well, is this thing physically possible? Sure, 100%. But that's not always the conversation that needs to be had.
No.
And sometimes people just need to hear somebody else say, yes, you can do this. Just, be smart about it.
What's interesting to me listening to it, number one, I needed to bite my tongue because I wanted to be pedantic a couple of times, which just would not have added anything to the conversation. Fellow pedants, feel free to put it in the comments because you're not the only one, but that wasn't the point of the conversation. The point of the conversation is, and at least for me, what I got from that was a secular redefinition and a positive use to the term spiritual.
Exactly.
And when you can engage with something, I think that for me, the word spiritual is just, keep it away because I have baggage. I have religious trauma. I have all of those pieces that make me look at that word spiritual and go, nah, fuck off.
Yeah. Here's the thing. If you hear a word just outside of any additional context, that word gives you an intense emotional response. If that's disgust, if that's, indignance, if that's anger, that's you. You have some work to do to dig out exactly why that word made you feel that way. It might be a reasonable way to feel, but it still is something you are bringing to a word that does not have that emotion inherently attached. So as we're having these conversations, if we use words that make you feel uncomfortable, that is a great opening to a much bigger conversation around why that is, and is that logical? And if it is, that's great. We want to know about it. If it's not, then you might have just been able to add a word to your lexicon that you avoided before for a bad reason.
Decoupling spirituality from supernatural.
Yeah.
I can dig that. There's a whole conversation about, descriptivism and all of that, but let's go with that.
Yeah.
Let's go with that.
All right,
Good
let's
call.
talk to Chris in Scotland.
Ooh.
Chris, you would like to talk about the morality of teaching young children about something as gruesome as the crucifixion. Is that correct?
That is indeed correct. And hi, V. Hi, Eric. It's nice to be back on the show.
Oh, yes. You called in about ghost hunting the other week, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
Okay, I remember you. That was a really good call. I enjoyed that a lot. All right, Chris, what can we help you with today? What's your question?
Okay, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the morality of teaching children, school-age children, about things like, I'm not sure what the wording is, but the lead up to Jesus' crucifixion, and a lot of the time in Roman Catholicism, it's got really vivid, gruesome imagery about him getting lashed with a whip and cut and the crown of thorns bleeding.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering about your thoughts of the morality of that, because personally, growing up in that environment, I had really vivid night terrors about Jesus' crucifixion when I was younger, and they were always called Jesus visions. I'm not sure what the difference is. I think possibly they thought there was some supernatural element to it, but yeah, I'm just wondering about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, imagine being like putting a kid in a situation where they have to synthesize that kind of graphic information.
Torture, yeah.
And then have them have a nightmare about it and be like, oh, it's a sign.
Yeah.
Like, how? Yes, Chris, I think you're absolutely correct. I don't think that it is. Well, here's here's there's a little more nuance in this. I was going to go straight into I think that it's wrong, but there's more nuance.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
I grew up watching things like The Passion of the Christ, which, if you have seen, is a very gruesome, basically like torture porn version of the Crucifixion. And we would never have been allowed to watch anything else at that level of gore. But because it was Jesus, then we were suddenly allowed to watch it at ages like 8 and 10 or whatever. And honestly, the blood didn't really bother me so much. I was more creeped out by the character they got to play, Satan. Yeah. But I think that we get into my problem, which is the hypocrisy of it, as opposed to the actual content. Because kids actually are extremely curious and don't have all, like we were talking about baggage around words just a minute ago. They don't have a lot of that baggage coming into things. And there's a lot of, oh no, protect the children, this could be concerning. But a lot of that is just because we've grown up in a culture where we have internalized that X thing is concerning. And kids are just kind of like, yeah, okay. I guess that's a thing. And that's not all of them. And that's not to say that everything is appropriate at all times. But my biggest concern here is that there are so many Christians who will, on the one hand, expose children to this kind of violence, and on the other hand, treat children in this way where they shouldn't learn about gay parents, or they shouldn't learn about, gender identity, or, they shouldn't have to learn about racism or slavery. Like, all of these things, like, oh no, coddle and protect the children and erase certain things that we find uncomfortable, while at the same time encouraging things like, preaching in schools and telling these kids that, hell is real, which ultimately is going to be a lot more scarring. So we can have the conversation about at what age is it appropriate to introduce certain levels of violence and gore and torture into a child's, media diet. But I'm not a parent, so I wouldn't really feel comfortable going down that route, because I think each child is different. I would have been fine with most of it, frankly.
I'm not a parent either, but I'm totally comfortable diving into it.
Yeah, if you would like to go into that element, I'm just mostly concerned about the hypocrisy. But
for sure,
it's bring it.
Well, I guess first the first response that I would give to the last piece that you gave is, if you've read young adult fiction, which I know you did growing up. Middle school is apparently the appropriate time to absolutely emotionally scar kids.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But that said, I think that it is manipulation. I think it's child abuse. I think that when you are horrifying and emotionally scarring kids into behaving a certain way, it is the easy way out to try and manipulate and get a behavior that you want. And the fact is, having a little bit of empathy makes it even more difficult to engage with. It reminds me of the conversation that I've often seen, even growing up, around spanking, right? A parent goes, I was spanked as a child, I turned out well. It must have been the child abuse that I suffered that helped me get there, especially if they still have a good relationship with their parents. They think, my parent loved me and they hit me. And obviously, that's okay. And so you have people who otherwise would look at child abuse and be mortified, justifying that child abuse because that's what they were taught and it was made normal. And I think that when you look at it in that context, the religious justification for that child abuse, you can empathetically look at the individuals who are doing that and go, their goal isn't to emotionally scar their kids. They have just been taught that this is appropriate and this is necessary, and it continues a cycle of abuse that we see generation after generation. And recognizing it as such and calling it out as such, I think is important. But also, look at the Twitter threads. How many stupid fucking people on the atheist side of things go, this is child abuse, and the Christians are looking there. I don't see that, right? No, it takes a little bit more time. It takes a little bit more nuance, and just that tiny little bit of saying, hey, I understand you don't think that, but take a step outside from where you are. Let's look at this from a secular perspective. It is child abuse. You're not trying to abuse your kids, but that is the impact, right? The intent does not always match the impact, and the intent of the parent is not matching the impact of the trauma that child is receiving. And I know I don't have kids, but I'm going to stand behind that.
That's actually a really good distinction, which I think I was missing in my initial evaluation, because at this point it has been so kind of ingrained in me that it is a fictional story, that I was kind of equating it with other fictional stories that I engaged with at that age, you know? But there is a big difference between showing a child a certain amount of violence based on, you know, their tolerance of it, and saying, you did this, right? Pointing at a kid and saying, your sins made this happen. And so because of this thing, you must act a certain way. That emotional manipulation piece, that is most certainly abusive. So yeah, I think that is kind of the crux of this. And I love that you brought that up. But Chris, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, personally, I think it's a bit much, especially with some of the really graphic imagery they show. I don't know if either of you have been in a Catholic church recently, but you know, they have these giant plinths just showing these really gruesome scenes, and anybody can just walk in, and I think you're right about the hypocrisy aspect. Yeah, there is definitely a double standard.
It is.
I think there is definitely a double standard, and what what is acceptable. Generally, I just find the whole imagery of it really, really unpleasant. You know, I kind of had a thing of avoiding, you know, the TV and things at Easter.
Yeah.
Just because I cannot stand the imagery.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it is that doesn't mean that it is intentionally done by those people with the same understanding that you're bringing to the table, unfortunately.
But it also doesn't mean that you're weird. Like, it is very normal of you to not want to associate like a holiday with, you know,
brutal torture.
Like that's not a weird thing. That is a very normal thing. So like, you are very normal there, Chris.
Yeah, we're right there with you.
Yeah. I hope that this kind of answered your question.
It did a little bit, yeah. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I suppose, I was just looking for, you know, what your takes were on the matter, and I found them really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for calling in.
By all means, and I hope you both have an amazing day.
Thank you. You as well.
Chris is a sweet person.
I like Chris. Chris seems like he's got like a really, I don't know, like the way that he's like critically analyzing things and then calling it and being like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, that's kind of awesome.
I prefer that approach much more than I do people, you know, throwing it out onto social media and just starting shitstorms and going, oh, maybe that was a bad idea.
That's me. All right, Eric, you pick somebody. We've got two that are, you know, I would really like to talk to, and then two that are kind of okay. All right, fine. We'll take Kay from nowhere. Kay would like to discuss the assertion that atheists have faith that's made by some theists. Sounds interesting. Kay, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? I spoke last week.
Yeah. So discuss the assertion that atheists have faith.
So this is like when someone says you have to have faith to be an atheist.
Just as much faith.
Or like, yeah.
No.
Are we approaching this as like, are you a believer? Do you think that, or are we on the same side of this, kind of just looking at it?
I'm an atheist, but I'm not sure if that means that we're on the same side. I have a lot of different perspectives from other atheists.
Sure. So how do you define faith? I think that's probably going to be where we pivot the most. What is faith?
Belief without evidence.
Okay. I use the same definition. So do you think that atheism requires faith? Because we might need to just define what atheist means. But what do you think?
Not to be an atheist, but like, let's say, for instance, a Christian comes by and says, hey, how do you know you're not a brain in a vat, right? That has nothing to do with my atheism, and yet it's true. He makes a good point when he says that, because I do take it on faith that I'm not a brain in a vat.
Brain in a vat. Got it. I missed what you said at first. I was like, what did Kay say? I'm trying to, yes, and there is a certain amount of leeway that we give each other. I think societally, like anyone that I'm actually honestly engaging with, I grant to them a couple of things that are we just do, like the laws of logic. Anytime I'm talking to somebody, I don't need them to justify the laws of logic to use logic, because it's circular, but in order for us to have a cogent conversation, cohesive, I do. I'm going to give you the laws of logic, you give me the laws of logic, and then we go forward. And so when it comes to something like hard solipsism, this idea of a brain in a vat.
Here's where I
can't say that I don't have faith. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know. V, what do you think? And then I'll actually think about it while you.
Here's what I think. I think that we operate on faith a lot in our day-to-day life for all kinds of things. I have faith that the airplane that I'm getting on this week is going to show up, and dwindling faith considering the state of the airlines right now. But, I've got faith that it's going to hold me in the air. I don't know how it works. And the only thing I have to go off of is the fact that it's never not held me in the air before, but that to an extent is belief without evidence. If we classify evidence.
You do have evidence of that.
What evidence would I have that it would do it this time?
Well, not this time, but
that's my point.
Seeing planes flying in the past is evidence that they work. So that is a little bit of evidence. That's not fake.
Well, I think that.
What I'm trying to say is.
What are you trying to say, Kay?
Okay, so when a Christian says, how do you know you're not a brain in a vat? And I say, yeah, I don't, checkpoints. I immediately say, hey, the issue is not whether or not somebody has faith, is how much faith does somebody have. And I think I came up with a pretty good way of quantifying that.
Okay.
So let's say, for instance, you believe in God, right? Mm-hmm. You have a 1 in 2 chance of getting it right. I'm choosing a 50-50 here just for the sake of fairness, right? Okay. But there's so let's say you believe in God, there's a 1 in 2 chance of getting it right. But if you then start adding qualities about your God, like, say, for instance, okay, he hates homosexuals, he doesn't want you to eat shrimp, you already tossed 2 coins, right? So the first coin was, okay, my God doesn't like homosexuals. You have a 25% chance of getting it right. But since you're a Christian, right, how many attributes have you attributed to God already, right? He's 3 in 1. He created the universe and not the universe before God.
Right, right. That's why I know that there are quite a few atheists, myself included, that will say that technically on the subject of a God in general, I'm agnostic. But when you get to specific gods and you start defining them in the way that you described just now, I am atheistic in that I actively say that God does not exist.
Or
correct.
Or rephrasing it, I don't think that your God.
Right.
exists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we're in agreement there. What else have we got?
Yeah, I can't push back either.
So then you make Christians aware, or any other religious person, that if you want to have the most chances of getting it right, just believe in God. Just don't assume anything about your God. Don't assume that he created the universe. Maybe the universe, it just popped into existence and then came God. Maybe it's many gods. Maybe it's don't assume anything, right? And that's how you take the fangs out of religions. That's how you make them not push for abortion, not push for.
Yeah.
Throwing gays off of buildings.
On one level, for sure. You just described why a lot of people back in the day called themselves deists, right? They were doing exactly that. They were saying, I don't want to say I don't believe in a God, but I don't want to, believe in X God or Y God. So I'm just going to say there is a God. Does this God engage with us? We don't know. Did the God create the universe? Maybe. Like that. Okay, cool. Like, I'm down to make theists into deists if, we're doing that in a non-violent, non-coercive way. But, like,
well, yeah,
I agree.
It's positive for the world.
But, like, what? Okay, so how does that happen? Like, I guess my next question is, I agree with you. That would be, in my worldview, better for the world. But, like, now what?
Well, you're just trying to quantify faith. And just let them know that, hey, you have less chances of getting it right than the next guy who is a deist.
Okay.
And it's a lot harder to turn them into atheists. You were saying something? Sorry.
I see what you're saying. You're being pragmatic. So you're saying it's easier to make someone into a deist than it is to make them into an atheist. So maybe just focus on making deists instead.
Well, honestly, Kay, I think that you are way more optimistic than I am. I am way too jaded to take that approach. I was talking to V earlier about how many people are, themselves Don Quixote de la Mancha tilting at windmills. How many people are not willing to grant that those things are separable, that those qualities and traits are individually, countable, that they all have to go together. In fact, when I've tried that approach, because I have tried that, I mean, we've done this for years. When I've tried that approach, what I got was the Kalam cosmological argument, as said by William Lane Craig, this idea that all of those qualities are entailed, baked in, and necessary, that they are inextricable. And that is the generous portion. There are so many other people who are, no, it's not. It drives me up the wall. I wish that I could be with you, that we could grant that and like get people there. People are stupid, Kay. I think more people are too stupid to get there than not. And I
don't know. It's not stupidity. I'm not going to grant that.
Okay, stubborn. How about that?
Stubborn is better. I like stubborn more.
Yeah, but
here's the problem with this theory, in my opinion, as somebody who came from a Christian background. Your argument, Kay, to like kind of weight the scales equally and then like add assertions on either side and see which one comes out on top, makes sense if you're coming from a perspective of there is no evidence, and so now we start making claims. The problem is that Christians think there is evidence. So in order to get them to a place where those scales would actually be 50-50 in their mind, you would have to debunk all of the evidence that they bring to you. And that's kind of why we can't ever get there, because we just keep going back to debunking the evidence that they bring to prove to them that they don't have that evidence, so we can get to that 50-50 place. Do you see where the problem is there?
I guess I would ask, what is the evidence? Like, what specifically are you talking about?
Sure. Kate, look at the trees. It's
bad evidence. No,
but how do you know it's your God?
Oh, you're making me put the hat on, Kay. Why would you do that? Why are you making me put the Christian hat on? Okay, so I will.
Just be devil's advocate for a second.
I will be devil's advocate for a second, but not for so long that it's going to alienate people. Okay. If it gets weird, I'm going to call it and we'll cut. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Cool. So if I were putting on the Christian hat, then I would approach this from the. Was it the ontological argument?
Modal ontological argument?
Not modal, no.
Just ontological?
Just that in order for reality to exist, a God is required for that reality to be consistently existing. And because of that, anything in reality would be evidence for that God. And so if I held up, a mug, and I point to this mug and say, this is evidence of God, because without a God, not only would it not exist, but nothing would exist, then everything would be evidence to me.
And then I would say, fair enough, that's a possibility, but there isn't a sign that says, there isn't a sign in the sky that says don't eat shrimp or kill homosexuals, right? And so how did you get to that conclusion? Right?
Oh.
I might agree with you that there might be a God, but you're starting to add shit on top of it, so.
Oh,
Got it.
yeah. That's
But then you're becoming Don Quixote there.
no, but like this is Kay, I'm curious. Were you ever a Christian, or have you been an atheist forever?
I was an atheist since I was like 8 or 9, and I didn't even know there was a word for it. I just decided that it was bullshit.
Okay.
And my first exposure to atheism, to another atheist, was when I was 12. So that happened a little bit later.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And to me, what we're doing right now is we are trying to explain what indoctrination does to somebody, because you're right. Even if we were to grant the entirety of William Lane Craig's Kalam, like version of the Kalam cosmological argument that makes it into a God that is personal, that is omniscient, that is outside space and time, that is active in our universe, like all of these things that William Lane Craig says the Kalam proves, even if we were to grant all of that, how we get to the God of the Bible is a gap that no apologist has been able to jump over yet, at least not to my satisfaction. And so you are absolutely correct that there is an enormous gap even between accepting there is a God and making claims that it is a specific God. And it's very hard to bridge that. Nobody has done that sufficiently. But for a Christian, it doesn't matter because they are filling that gap in by accident. So you know how like you don't actually see color on the sides of your eyes? Did you know this?
Okay.
So like your rods and cones live in the middle bit of your eye. So the sides of your vision don't have color, but because your brain knows what those colors are supposed to be, it fills it in for you. So you don't actually see the colors on the sides of your vision. It's just filled in because your brain knows what's supposed to be there. And
I do see them.
right, exactly. But like that's just what your brain is telling you that you see. You don't actually have the mechanisms to see them because your rods and cones are not there. So
No, I do have the mechanisms because my brain does the extra work.
Exactly.
So even if I don't have the tones,
Exactly.
the brain still does it, so I can still see color.
Exactly. And that is what I'm trying to get at. The rods and cones are the arguments. Okay, there is a God. That God is the God of the Bible.
And you're standing there going, it's black and white, damn it.
Right, because you don't have the ability to see those. But what you said is correct. You are seeing a connection there. You are seeing that blind spot because your brain has filled it in. And that is what happens with Christians, especially when they're indoctrinated from a young age. That blind spot is filled in by their brain so effectively that they don't see it as a blind spot. And so it's really, really difficult to get them to acknowledge that. So that is why these conversations feel so weird and like obvious to a lot of people who maybe weren't Christians for very long. Because
No.
they're like, why aren't you seeing this blind spot? It's huge.
Yeah.
I have to clarify. When I said that I was an atheist, at a young age, that doesn't mean that I wasn't, that somebody didn't try to indoctrinate me.
Oh, yeah, I know.
I was raised in a very Catholic family, and I went to a retreat. Well, actually, they lied to me. They told me that they were going to send me to a boot camp, and I ended up going to a retreat where they told me that they would wake me up at like 5 a.m. And if
Oh,
I
no, you had to
misbehaved,
deal
they
with
would put
that?
bricks on
Oh, that sucks.
they would put bricks in my hands and, just make me kneel in there for hours. And so, yeah.
Okay.
I was a black sheep.
Oh, yeah.
I want to hug you.
No, and I definitely don't want to
No,
downplay that element at all. But what you are saying is that, well, what I'm saying is that I don't want to say what your experience personally has been in the faith that you grew up in, but you did not believe it, so your brain did not fill in that gap, which is why the people who do believe it have a difficult time seeing that gap. And so what I'm saying ultimately here, and then we're going to have to wrap up, is that I think you're correct to view faith by matters of degree. And the more claims you make that are unsubstantiated, the less likely that thing is going to be true. I think that's a really good way to look at faith, especially when talking with like precepts. The problem is that a lot of the people that are coming to the table are not going to meet you at that place where they acknowledge that they don't have the evidence because of that blind spot that we've been talking about. So I think you're correct. It's the pragmatic element that I've got a problem with.
Do you know why they won't acknowledge the evidence that, against their beliefs?
Oh, there are lots of reasons.
Yeah.
Well, the main one is because they think that if you disprove their beliefs, that they no longer have the right to believe in God. But I'm trying to say that you can still believe in God while not making the claims. So you can still be a deist.
Yeah, well,
That's
I mean,
what I'm trying to sell to.
that's kind of like telling somebody who went through a really terrible breakup, oh, there are more fish in the sea. Like, it's still very emotionally painful to lose that God. And so you're going to do everything you can to not do that. Even if you do believe in a God, it's not that one. It's like, oh, don't worry, you were catfished, but the other person is still real. It's just they're not the same age or gender or name or personality that you thought. So, like, there is an emotional component as well that does play into it. But we're going to have to get on to the next call. Thank you so much for calling in, though, Kay, and feel free to call back.
That's cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add at the end of that, I didn't like the call was great. The only thing that I would add in at the end of that is that it is similar enough to a number of emails that I've gotten that have been kind of frustrating that I would want to warn Kay away from that direction. And that is the magic bullet idea. That while you may be right that a majority of people may be motivated a certain way, they're not all that way. And when you carry the assumption in, it can really be damaging during the conversation, which is why it's so important not to assume that they're motivated for the reasons that you think that they're motivated, but to ask them first, work through that together, and then make that, that leap once it's justified. Because when it happens beforehand, you just look like you're talking at them, and it's so hard to move forward after making that mistake. And I just want to warn you against that. But otherwise,
if you do have a foolproof way to get theists to admit that they have no evidence and start from there, like, tell us. That sounds like an awesome thing to have in your back pocket. It's just
so
you
can tell V. I've read way too many people thinking they've got the magic bullet argument too. I'm not going to engage because nope.
All right.
I'm done.
So we've got time for one more call, and I'd like to take Philip in Oklahoma.
Okay, to the other callers, thank you so much for calling in. No, go ahead.
Yeah. Philip, you are calling to ask about allyship, it sounds like?
That is correct. It's a lot has happened over the past 2 years, and probably even last week, obviously. It's not about any of those things directly, but in allyship around those things that I wanted to talk about. In particular, it was the gentleman that was on with Eric last week.
Kevin, yes.
Yeah, Kevin. So at the very beginning in the intro, he was talking about it, and just some background on me. I'm a black guy, and I've been snipped. I lived in a foreign country where my right to get snipped was actually impeded. So I'm like sympathizing. So not only do I sympathize, but I've always held a belief like whatever happened was not correct. But Kevin was like, well, if you are male, it's your time to kind of be quiet, listen, kind of thing. And I was just stopping and thinking, like, well, all that stuff that happened in 2020 with the protests for Black Lives Matter and everything, I ran a group, like a tech group, and they had like a special meeting. They kind of put me on the spot, like, well, you're the only black person here, so, we're going to listen. The white people are going to be quiet and
oh, God.
We'll listen to you. And I was just like,
oh, that's cringy.
I'm like, black people have been talking about this forever. Women have been talking about this forever. It's not time to listen, my personal opinion. It's like time for action. And just like I kind of felt like Kevin, like just his comment, it's not like demonizing him in any way. He has good intentions and everything like that. It's just that it felt like there's like a set of allies that fall in the category of male that is like, by saying that, it can kind of be pushing away these allies that could possibly help. And just wanted to kind of get your guys' thoughts on that.
Oh man, I have so many thoughts. I saw a quote from Jordan Peterson like yesterday.
Are you about to quote Jordan Peterson on this show?
I am, and then I'm going to tell you why I hate it.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Easy.
I've gone for a month.
Even a broken clock can be right twice a day, but in this case, that's not what happened. Jordan Peterson essentially had said, I forget what the exact quote was, but if you have something to say and you don't, that you're being silenced. And it comes from a place of such unbelievable privilege, right? I think that there's a lot of us, really, when it comes down to it, if you have been marginalized, if you've experienced abuse, then you know that not speaking up is a survival mechanism. Not speaking up and making sure that you're safe is really, really freaking important. And so we sit back and we listen and we make sure that it's a safe place to speak up, because the consequences are a lot more than a lot of people with privilege fucking realize. Right. And so I think that when it comes to making sure that you're listening, I see that as a response to the Jordan Peterson quote, this privileged idea that not only should you speak up, but not recognizing that your speaking is coming at the cost of speaking over other people. You know, it's for the same reason that when I'm in a room and I recognize that I'm probably the biggest person in that room, that I'm not unintentionally threatening people, you know, or making them feel unsafe. Not because I'm, you know, it's just a conscientious thing. You know, I think when Kevin was speaking up, when we had talked about it, that is not the only tool, but it is a really, really important one, especially when the conversation is starting. If you are in a position of privilege, to make sure that you are not speaking over people, because you know, you're given that platform, and it's just making sure that you're not shutting other people out. You know, I absolutely agree that if you kept doing that, then you would be pushing away allies, but that's why that's not the only tool. It's just an important thing to recognize.
Got it. And I guess for me personally, it's just been like, I think there was also a panel that one of my groups that I led was, and at the time it was for women in tech, and they were looking for an MC, and they'd been looking, and at the last time I was like, if you don't have one, I'd be happy to do it. They're like, well, I don't think you can do it. And I was like, if you're looking and I want to help, like I want to be an ally, kind of thing. So just kind of all around this allyship where it's like, there are those that are could be grouped in that party that's, you know, like they're against me, but actually there are a bunch that aren't, and that could also be kind of like marginalizing them out of helping you, right? Because
totally
if
agreed.
I take it from the stance of a black man, right? Like it is the white people in power that are going to help me, unfortunately, and it really sucks.
I mean, totally. The use of the tool is to put people who are in that position of privilege in check, to make sure that they're not doing that at the cost of marginalized folks. And I totally get that. And I think that what was said last week is a very important tool, but for the example you gave, that's not the right tool. You know, like we've got to make sure that we've got a pretty robust toolbox so that we can continue to affect the change that we want in the world. And I don't think that makes the tool less useful. It just makes it specific. And I don't think those are mutually exclusive things. It's just recognizing what's necessary for the time. And so
I would like to jump in.
Go, absolutely.
So I have a couple of takes that, I don't know, are not the standard yes or no.
Okay.
So I think a lot of the time when people say, don't speak because it's not your time to speak, or, you know, be quiet and let X group talk, the weird thing is when you ask, okay, who are you talking to? Right? In this conversation, you are saying either I'm talking or this person is talking, and I should make sure that you get to talk. I'm like, okay, but like, who are you talking to? Like, in what contexts is that silence helpful, and in what context is it harmful? if we are in a space where we are commiserating, then yes, let the group that is being silenced speak and share their experiences. But we should not be, and when people say, let them talk, I feel like they have this assumption that we're only going to talk to each other. We're only going to talk in spaces that we all agree. And so I'll let you talk so that I learn more, which is great. But that's not what we need. We need the people who are saying, I should be quiet right now, to not be quiet, but not in that space. In the space where they're talking at the people in power who are making these decisions and coming to their defense. And that's not the instinct. When we say, I shouldn't be speaking for you, or, I shouldn't speak at all, you should own this conversation.
Yeah.
For them, it's like, oh, I'm giving you a safe space to talk to me. And for them, it's like, no, I've been yelling at the people in power for so long. You yell at the people in power now.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah,
that's exactly it.
It's who we're talking to that's implied, and that's where the disconnect is.
That's a brilliant point. You're absolutely right. I was carrying an implicit assumption that it was a feeling of commiseration.
Yeah.
And that was not stated directly, which exactly is the reason why I would imagine Philip took umbrage at what was said. That's incredibly well said.
Yeah, so that would be my contribution there. Just like, yes, in both situations, there's a different response. But when the people who are in trouble are speaking every day, trying to explain their situation to the people who can fix it, the solution is not to be silent in that. That's not allyship. The solution is to come alongside and add your voice. But because the people who are most often in these privileged positions of being like, oh, I shouldn't, aren't thinking about the people in power all the time and aren't thinking about that constant conflict. They're thinking about, oh, the people who agree with me, this safe group right here. When they think, I need to be quiet, they're thinking, oh, I need to be quiet in this context.
I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's...
Because I have a bit of understanding there. I feel like if you've developed the habit of taking a second, recognizing that you have got privilege in a situation, and then seeing where you're impacting and how you're impacting before just diving in, I like that habit. The thing is, analyze the situation. If it's the situation, Philip, that you gave, dive the fuck in. If the situation is commiseration and talking amongst yourselves, then recognizing where you are and stepping back and is important. And I'm right there with you.
When someone says, I should be quiet, you should speak, the next question should be, who do you assume that we are speaking to? Because that will then guide whether or not that is the correct option to be silent. So that would be my take.
I just want to kind of jump in and add here.
Yeah.
This is my first time calling in, and your screeners are top notch, because it took like an idea that I was like, I don't know, and
aren't they amazing?
Just, turned it into exactly what I wanted to say,
so
good.
That
I could talk with you, and then talking with you, I had this kind of vague, amorphous idea of what it was, but then Eric, you and V together, you just kind of turned it into exactly what the two parts are. Are you being in a space to listen, or are you saying I want you to talk to those in authority because I don't have the power? And just all that together has kind of summed it up for me very, very well. And you guys are excellent speakers, and I love listening to the Church of Eric and V every Sunday.
Well, thank you so much for calling in, Philip.
I'm so glad that you had a good experience, and thank you so much for
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in. I think this was a really great way to end this show. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you.
Bye.
Before we go any further, though, I do want to make sure that we plug the show.
Yes, that would be helpful.
Yeah. This show is brought to you by you. If you like what we do, there are ways to support us, and we'd sincerely appreciate it. And guess what? You don't have to spend a penny. Watch the ads. Hit the like button. Hit subscribe. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't. Do it right now. Right now.
An odd number of times. However many, just an odd
number of times. Yeah, if you haven't shared this out and you know somebody that any of these conversations would be useful to send to, please do. The algorithm sees that, YouTube sees that and goes, hey, maybe this is actually some useful information. Maybe I should suggest it to more people. That's great. If you are fucking sick of the ads, totally get it. There's a way to get the show ad-free. If you go to patreon.com/skepticgeneration, that's patreon.com/skepticgeneration, you can get an ad-free version of the show. You can get an ad-free version of the podcast. If you didn't know that we have a podcast, hey y'all, we have a podcast. If you want to catch up on the show and you don't have the time, there's a podcast. And guess what? It's on all of the aggregated, podcast aggregator apps, and it's been there for over a year. Make use of it.
It's in the top 5% of podcasts.
It is in the top 5%.
In general, you guys, it's a good podcast. You should listen to it.
Yeah, we like it.
All right. But yeah, we want to make sure that we are able to continue to do this for you guys. And we really appreciate everybody who does contribute, who does show up every Sunday, who does watch and share things out.
Ooh, one more thing real quick.
Oh,
okay. Because my birthday's coming up. Maybe.
Oh, you're going to do a birthday plug?
I am going to do a birthday plug, and I'm going to say that Amazon Prime Day is coming up. Just saying. If you want to help contribute to our set, tiny.cc/SG wishlist. We'd sincerely appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, no, okay.
Although it is kind of cool, because if you go there, you will see what the set will kind of look like based on what we've put on there. So you'll get a sneak peek. All right, you guys, we are going to read some super chats before we close out, because I totally forgot that was a thing we did because I've been gone for a month.
And we're going to be putting these super chats. Do the things on that list.
Yes. All right. So RG sent a banana and $1 Australian and 99 cents.
I'm not sure. Carol Ann sent $5 with a there's so many emojis and GIFs with a Bravo dog. Thank you.
There's another $1.99 banana.
Sarah Dye sent $20. Thank you, Sarah. It says, I grew up Catholic and was weirded out by the focus on the crucifixion every Easter. I was especially disturbed. Having to shout out with the congregation, crucify him. I couldn't join in. Yeah. That's weird.
I went to a what's it the Friday before Good Friday? Mm-hmm. I was going to Black Friday, but that's Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I went to a Good Friday service at a Lutheran church, and the sets and the sound design, they had this just ringing around this tiny little cathedral, the sound of a nail being hammered.
Ooh.
And doors slamming. It was just the theater. It was amazing and disturbing as fuck. And then they were like, Happy Easter. And you're just kind of okay. Viper Zhang sent $5 and says, and God saved his favorite children so he can kill everyone else on the planet with a flood because he loves everyone.
JROJALA, I have no idea, sent $20 and says, just call me Jazz. Oh, there we go. I missed UV. If people see the Catholic Church's imagery as violent, you should get... Oh, wow. Okay, there's a whole lot more here. Hold on. Let me maximize the screen. I closed the screen. You should get a load of what we should vamp or something while I try and
that's
bring
amazing.
up the live
Let's hope that
stream.
it's still going.
Oh, right? It's still going. Okay. It's still going.
Okay, I have no idea how this works.
I might have...
well, we have an excellent connection now, and all of the super chats went away. I know we had one more banana from Archie, and I think that that Jazz was talking about Jehovah's Witnesses.
Got it.
They ask children to watch or force them to watch.
I tried to maximize, and I closed the screen. I am so sorry.
I am so sorry. Opposite.
Yeah, I did.
And then Carol Ann sent a thank you heart with $1.99. Thank you, Carol Ann.
Thank you.
All right, you guys. With that, we will leave you to the rest of your Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, we're glad we had this talk.